She grabbed my son's backpack and yelled, "You're not allowed to stand here!" Before I could even step out of my truck, the school bus was still coming, kids were watching, and she stood there like she owned the whole street. My son looked scared and said, "Please don't touch me." But she didn't stop. She pointed her phone at him and shouted, "I'll call the police and have you taken away." I walked closer and said calmly, "Let him go." She turned fast, looked at me up and down and laughed. "You don't tell me what to do. I run this area. The HOA runs this block." Then she slapped a yellow paper on the bus stop sign and said, "See? Unauthorized use. Your kid is trespassing." I felt my hands tighten, but I stayed quiet. She didn't know this bus stop was on city land. She didn't know the camera across the street was live. And she definitely didn't know that the call she was about to make was going straight to my own dispatch line. She smirked and said, "Watch this. I'll have cops here in 2 minutes." I looked at my son and said softly, "Stand behind me." As she hit the call button, she smiled like she'd already won. And that's when she said the one line she would soon regret forever. "By the time they get here, you'll both be gone." She stood there with her phone on speaker, talking loud so everyone could hear. "Yes, this is the HOA president. There's a man harassing children at our bus stop. He looks dangerous." She looked straight at me when she said that, like she wanted people to believe it. Parents across the street started staring. One mom pulled her kid closer. That hurt more than her words. My son whispered, "Dad, did I do something wrong?" I shook my head. "No, buddy. You did nothing." Karen crossed her arms and said, "See? Even his kid knows he's guilty." Then she leaned close and lowered her voice. "People like you don't belong in nice neighborhoods." That's when I knew this wasn't about rules. This was about power. A few minutes later, a black SUV rolled in fast. 2 men stepped out wearing dark uniforms. No body cams. No name tags. One of them said, "Sir, turn around." Karen smiled wide. "Told you. I own this block." I looked at their badges and felt my jaw tighten. Fake. Cheap metal. Not even the right seal. One of them grabbed my arm hard. My son screamed, "Stop! That's my dad!" That was the moment everything crossed the line. I calmly said, "You might want to check who you're touching." The fake cop laughed. "Or what?" I slowly reached into my pocket, not fast. Just enough. Karen gasped and shouted, "He's reaching for a weapon!" But what I pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was my badge. And before any of them could react, my phone buzzed in my hand. Dispatch calling. My dispatch. I answered the call and put it on speaker. "This is Chief Ramirez," I said calmly. The 2 men froze for half a second. Just a half. Karen didn't notice. She was still shouting, "Arrest him now! He's lying!" Dispatch said, "Chief, we've got an unauthorized call from this location. You're confirming fake officers on scene?" One of the men stepped back. The other whispered, "Man, that's him." Karen's smile slowly faded. "What is this? Why are they talking to you like that?" she asked. I looked at her and said, "Because this bus stop sits on city land, and you just filed a false report." She snapped back, "That's impossible. The HOA owns everything here." I shook my head. "You never checked the map." Right then, real patrol cars pulled in from both sides, lights flashing. Kids started backing away. Parents were recording now. The 2 fake cops tried to walk off, but real officers stopped them fast and pushed them against the SUV. Karen stepped back, shaking her head. No, this is a mistake. I know the mayor." An officer said, "Ma'am, turn around." She pointed at me and screamed, "He planned this! He tricked me!" I walked closer and said quietly, "You grabbed my child. You lied to police, and you hired fake officers." She laughed nervously. "It's just HOA business." That's when the officer said the words she never expected to hear. "Ma'am, you're under arrest." As they cuffed her, she shouted one last thing at me. "You can't do this to me." I leaned in and said, "I didn't. You did it to yourself." They put her in the back of the patrol car, still yelling through the glass, "This neighborhood will fall apart without me." No one answered her. Parents were quiet. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. One officer walked over and said, "Chief, we pulled her HOA records." He paused. "She's been filing fake violations for months. Towing cars, threatening families. I looked across the street and saw a man holding his phone with shaking hands. He said, "She towed my car with my baby's seat inside." Another woman spoke up. "She told me my husband couldn't park because he's not on the deed." Karen didn't just cross the line today. She'd been crossing it for a long time. I knelt beside my son and said, "You okay?" He nodded but hugged me tight. That's when one of the fake cops broke down and said, "She paid us, said the real police wouldn't come." That confession changed everything. An officer looked at me and said, "Chief, this just turned federal." Karen's yelling stopped. She realized this wasn't an HOA problem anymore. As the car door closed, she whispered through the window, "I was just trying to protect my neighborhood." I looked at the families standing there and said, "No, you were trying to control people." And that was only the beginning. Because what we found next in her HOA files shocked the entire city. Later that afternoon, I sat in a small room at the station while investigators spread her HOA files across the table. Papers everywhere, photos, emails, fake warning letters. One officer said, "Chief, she was charging families fines that don't even exist." They showed me a list. Names after names, mostly single parents, elderly couples, new families who didn't know the rules yet. My jaw tightened. She picked easy targets. Then a detective slid one photo forward. It showed the bus stop, the same one from this morning. A red circle was drawn around it. He said she knew it wasn't HOA land. She just hoped no one would challenge her. That made my stomach turn. Outside the room, I heard someone asking to speak with me. It was a man in work boots holding a hard hat. He said, "Sir, she told me if I didn't pay her fine, she'd report me to immigration." I paused. "Are you a citizen?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, born here." She didn't care about truth, only fear. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from City Legal. "Chief, media is on the way." Karen had already posted online. She claimed I abused my power to protect my kid. The story was spreading fast. An officer asked, "Should we respond?" I looked at the screen, then at the evidence on the table. "No," I said. "Let her talk." Because the truth was about to speak louder than she ever could. By evening, news vans lined the street near the station. Karen's post was everywhere. She called herself a victim. Said I used my badge to scare a community leader. People online were arguing hard. Some believed her. Some didn't. Then the body cam footage was released. It showed her grabbing my son's backpack, her shouting, her lying on the phone, her smiling when the fake cops arrived. The comments flipped fast. One reporter asked me, "Chief, why didn't you stop her sooner?" I looked straight at the camera and said, "Because bullies expose themselves when you let them talk." Behind the scenes, detectives kept digging, and that's when they found the account. An HOA bank account only she controlled. Thousands of dollars moved every month. No records, no approval. An officer walked in and said quietly, "She was stealing from her own neighbors." That night, a judge signed multiple warrants: fraud, impersonation, false reports, child endangerment. When they went to serve them, Karen wasn't home. Her car was gone. Her phone was off. One detective looked at me and said, "She's running." I stared at the map on the wall and said one thing: she won't get far, because she forgot one detail. Every toll road in this state reports straight to my department. Just after midnight, a hit came in. Her car passed through a toll gate 2 counties away. The system flagged it red. I watched the screen light up and said, "That's her." State Patrol moved fast. No chase, no drama. They boxed her in at a gas station. When they opened the door, she was crying, shaking, still saying, "I didn't do anything wrong." They brought her back before sunrise. This time, no shouting, no attitude, just silence. In the interview room, she finally looked at me and asked, "Was all this really necessary?" I leaned back and said, "You touched my child." She looked down. Later that day, families came to the station. Some brought coffee. Some just wanted to say thank you. One man said, "She made us feel small." I looked at them and said, "No one gets to do that." The city suspended the HOA. Every fine was canceled. Every record reviewed. When I picked my son up from school that afternoon, he asked, "Dad, is she gone?" I smiled and said, "She can't hurt anyone anymore." As we walked past the same bus stop, he stood a little taller. Freedom isn't loud. Sometimes it just stands its ground. And that morning taught the whole neighborhood one thing they'll never forget. You don't need power to be strong. You just need the truth. The next week, the courtroom was packed. Karen sat at the table in a plain sweater, no makeup, no confidence. She didn't look powerful anymore. She looked small. When the judge asked if she understood the charges, her voice cracked. Yes, they played the video again. The moment she grabbed my son. The moment she lied. You could hear kids crying in the background. The room went silent. Her lawyer tried to say it was a misunderstanding. The judge stopped him. This was abuse of authority, and she had none. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, neighbors stood up. A veteran, a single mom, an elderly couple. Each told the same story. Threats, fear, fake fines. The judge looked at Karen and said, "You didn't protect a community. You terrorized it." The sentence came down heavy. Jail time, restitution, a permanent ban from any HOA role. When they took her away, she looked back at the room. No one looked back at her. Outside, reporters asked me what lesson people should learn. I said one line that spread everywhere online. Power doesn't come from a title. It comes from doing what's right. That night, I stood at the bus stop again. Kids laughing, parents talking, no fear. Same place, different feeling. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood finally felt free. That Sunday morning, I watched my son step onto the bus without looking over his shoulder. No fear, no rushing, just a normal kid again. That mattered more to me than any headline. People still stopped me sometimes and said, "Chief, you didn't have to get involved like that." I always gave the same answer. I didn't step in as a chief. I stepped in as a father. The city placed a small sign near the bus stop a week later. City property, protected by law. Simple, clear, honest. I stood there for a moment, remembering how fast one person tried to turn power into a weapon, and how fast it fell apart when truth showed up. My son looked up at me and said, "Dad, are we safe now?" I smiled and put my hand on his shoulder. We always were, because in this country, land matters, family matters, and no fake title is stronger than the law. Karen thought fear made her powerful. She was wrong. The real power was standing right there all along. Quiet, patient, and ready when it mattered most. And that's something no HOA can ever take away. That night, as I locked the front door, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from the city council. "Chief, because of what happened, we're changing the law. No HOA can ever control public land again." I stared at the screen for a second. Karen didn't just lose her power. She erased it for everyone like her. The next morning, kids waited at the bus stop, laughing loud. Parents drank coffee. No papers on poles. No threats, no fear. My son looked at me and said, "Dad," she thought she was the boss. I smiled and said, "She forgot something important." He asked, "What?" I replied softly, "In this country, no one is above the law." And as the bus doors closed, I realized something deep. She tried to control one child and ended up freeing an entire neighborhood. Weeks later, life finally settled. The neighborhood felt different, lighter, calmer, like a weight had been lifted. Parents waved to each other at the bus stop. Kids ran around without glancing over their shoulders. Even the HOA offices remained empty, a silent reminder of what happens when power is abused. My son ran up to me, backpack bouncing, and said, "Dad!" "Everyone says you're a hero." I knelt down and shook my head. "No, buddy. Heroes don't start by looking for trouble. We just protect the people we love." Neighbors started coming by, bringing cookies, coffee, little thank you notes. A single mom whispered, "You saved us all. I can't believe how brave you were." And in that moment, I realized the real twist. It wasn't about Karen getting arrested or losing her power. The twist was that one act of standing up, not for fame, not for money, just for what's right, could change an entire community forever. As we walked home, my son asked, "Dad, will she ever come back?" I looked at the quiet street, the empty bus stop, the families smiling in their yards, and said, "No," because the truth is stronger than fear, and now everyone knows it. That day, I understood something powerful. Justice doesn't just punish the guilty. It gives freedom back to everyone who deserves it. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood and my family felt completely safe. Months passed. And the story of Karen's downfall became almost legendary in the neighborhood. People still whispered about how she thought a fake title, and fake cops could control everyone. Kids would joke, "Remember the bus stop battle?" and laugh. Even local news ran a follow-up, showing families enjoying the streets without fear. One afternoon, my son came running with a drawing. It was the bus stop. Kids playing, families smiling, and a small badge in the corner. He said, "This is our hero spot, Dad, where you saved everyone." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "It's not about me. It's about standing up when it matters." Across the street, neighbors waved. Some built little flower boxes near the bus stop. A sign that said "Protected by Law" gleamed in the sun. Everyone could see that one bully couldn't rewrite their lives. And late at night, as I sat on the porch, I realized the final twist. Karen tried to scare a child, but she ended up teaching a whole neighborhood how strong they really were. Power isn't about shouting paper or fake badges. It's about courage, truth, and protecting the people you love. And in our quiet little corner of the city, that lesson would never be forgotten. By the next school year, the neighborhood felt completely different. Kids waited at the bus stop laughing, parents chatted without worry, and even the local news ran stories about how one family stood up to abuse and changed the rules for everyone. Karen's name had almost disappeared from conversation, except as a warning of what happens when greed meets lies. One afternoon, my son ran up to me holding a small plaque someone had placed near the bus stop. It read, "Here courage stood. Here truth won." He looked at me with wide eyes. "Dad, this is our spot now." I knelt beside him, smiling. "Yes, buddy. This is where we learned that even one person, standing for what's right, can protect an entire community." And just then, a neighbor waved and shouted, "Thanks again, Chief!" I laughed softly. I didn't do it alone, because the final twist wasn't about Karen anymore. It was about the people she tried to scare, coming together stronger than ever. As the bus pulled away, my son waved at his friends, confident, fearless, free. And I knew finally the lesson was clear. No fake title, no lies, no bully can ever overpower truth, family, and courage. The bus stop was just a spot in the city, but it became a symbol of freedom. And that symbol would never fade. Months later, the neighborhood officially celebrated the bus stop with a small community gathering. Parents, kids, even local officers came to mark the spot as safe and public. Someone had made a little sign, "Protected by courage and law." Kids painted colorful chalk around it. Laughter filled the street, something that hadn't happened in years. My son ran around with his friends shouting, "This is our hero spot!" He came back holding my hand tightly. "Dad, we did it. Everyone's safe now." I looked around and realized the final twist of the whole ordeal. Karen tried to control, threaten, and scare a single child. And in doing so, she had unintentionally united an entire neighborhood. Families were closer than ever. Kids played freely, and everyone knew the truth mattered more than fear. As the sun set behind the houses, I whispered to my son, "Remember this. One act of standing up for what's right can change everything." He nodded, smiling. And for the first time in a long while, the bus stop wasn't just a bus stop, it was a symbol. A symbol that courage, family, and truth always win. And that lesson would last forever. By the following spring, the story of what happened at the bus stop had spread beyond our neighborhood. Local schools were teaching kids about standing up to bullies, and even nearby towns were sharing the video clips of Karen's fake cops being exposed. Parents told their children, "See, truth matters more than fear." One morning, as my son ran toward the bus, he stopped and pointed at the small plaque near the stop. "Dad, look, everyone comes to see our spot now." I smiled. "Yes, buddy. People remember courage." Then a new family moved in across the street. They looked nervous, worried about HOA rules or neighborhood bullies. I walked over and said warmly, "Don't worry. This is a safe place. We take care of each other here." The father nodded, eyes wide. "I can't believe how strong this community is." I patted my son's shoulder and whispered, "That strength." It started because we didn't stay silent, and the final twist of the whole story became clear. Karen tried to control one child, but she ended up creating a neighborhood that would never be afraid again. The bus stop stood there quietly, a simple place on city land, but it became a permanent reminder. Truth, courage, and family protect more than any title ever could. And for the first time, everyone, including my son, felt completely free. Years later, the bus stop had become more than just a place to catch the school bus. It was a landmark of courage in the neighborhood. Kids drew chalk rainbows, families planted flowers, and parents still waved to each other every morning. Even city officials occasionally stopped by to admire how one small act had changed a whole community. My son, now older, ran up to me one morning with a notebook full of drawings and plans for a safe neighborhood club. He said, "Dad, I want every kid to know they can stand up for themselves." I smiled and ruffled his hair. "That's right, buddy. That's exactly what we learned here." Across the street, neighbors were talking and laughing together. No fear, no fake fines, no HOA threats. Even new families felt welcome. And the final quiet twist hit me. Karen thought she could intimidate one child and control the block. Instead, she sparked something far stronger than her threats. She united a community, strengthened families, and created a place where truth and courage would always win. The bus stop stood there in the morning sun, peaceful, colorful, and full of life, a permanent reminder that even the smallest acts of bravery can protect generations to come. And as my son climbed onto the bus, he waved at me with a grin and said, "Dad, we did it." I watched him go, knowing that the neighborhood and our family would never be afraid again. The real victory wasn't mine. It was everyone's years later. Even my son's little kids had started walking to the same bus stop. The place was no longer just a stop, it was a symbol. Families shared stories of that day, teaching kids about standing up to bullies and the power of truth. The plaque was still there, faded slightly by the sun, but shining brighter than ever in meaning. One morning, a reporter from a local station came by and asked me to speak about the neighborhood. I said simply, "It started with one act of courage, protecting one child. But what grew from that is a community that stands together. That's stronger than any title, any rule, or any threat." My son, now grown, stood beside me and smiled. "People remember what happened here, Dad, and they remember how we didn't back down." Across the street, new families waved. Kids ran and laughed, and parents nodded to each other. No fear, no threats, just trust. And the final lasting twist was clear. Karen thought she could control one child in a small neighborhood. But she ended up leaving behind a community that would never forget courage, truth, and family. The bus stop was quiet again, bathed in morning sunlight. And I realized something deep. Power doesn't come from fear. It comes from standing up for what's right. And in that small corner of the city, the lesson would never be forgotten. Years turned into a decade, and the neighborhood still remembered that bus stop story. Kids who had been toddlers during Karen's chaos were now teenagers, and they told the tale like a legend, how one father, one badge, and one act of courage saved an entire community. The plaque was polished regularly by families, surrounded by flowers, drawings, and little notes, from kids who didn't even know the original fight, but felt the pride of safety it represented. My son, now in high school, came running one morning with his younger cousins. "Look, Dad, they all know this is the hero spot." I smiled, thinking about the chain reaction that had started with one scary morning and one act of calm, steady courage. Across the street, parents waved to each other, sharing stories of trust, laughter, and freedom that had grown from fear. And the final twist, the one no one ever expected, was that Karen, who had tried to control, threaten, and bully, had unknowingly created a legacy far bigger than her own power could ever reach. The bus stop wasn't just a place anymore. It was a symbol of courage, truth, and family standing together. And as I watched my son walk to the bus, waving to his friends, I whispered quietly to myself, "Fear ends where courage begins." And in this neighborhood, courage would always win. Decades later, new generations of kids still pass that bus stop every morning, laughing, running, and playing without a second thought about fear or rules. Parents taught them about what happened there, not as a scary story, but as a lesson. One act of courage can change everything. My son, now grown with kids of his own, would sometimes stop by the plaque with his children. He'd tell them, "This is where courage stood, where truth won. Remember that." Neighbors still gathered there for small celebrations, planting flowers, painting, and keeping the spot alive, not just as a bus stop, but as a symbol of freedom, family, and standing up for what's right. And the ultimate twist of all, Karen's name was barely remembered except as a cautionary tale. She had tried to control one child, but ended up inspiring a whole community to be stronger, kinder, and braver. The bus stop remained quiet in the mornings, but its story spoke loudly. Because fear can be temporary, but courage, truth, and love for your family, those last forever. And in that small corner of the city, the neighborhood knew it would always be safe, free, and unshakable. By the time my son's children were old enough to catch the bus there, the neighborhood had completely transformed. The bus stop was surrounded by colorful murals painted by kids, families planting flowers every season, and plaques reminding everyone of the story that started it all. Parents often told their kids, "This is more than a bus stop. It's where courage protected a community." I would sometimes stand quietly at the edge, watching the laughter, the games, the small acts of kindness passing between neighbors. My son would smile at me and say, "Dad, they'll never forget this place." And that was the final, lasting twist. Karen tried to intimidate one child, and instead she left a legacy of bravery that would protect generations. The street was calm, the bus stop peaceful, and the children running free. The lesson was clear to everyone. Fear is temporary, but courage and truth are forever. And as I watched my family walk together, I realized the greatest victory wasn't the arrest, the headlines, or the canceled fines. It was a community that would never again let fear rule over them. The bus stop wasn't just a place to wait for the school bus anymore. It had become a monument to standing up, protecting family, and letting truth win. And that, in the end, was the real power. It starts with explosive drama, introduces a clear villain, showcases the hero's hidden power, builds multiple twists, delivers justice, and ends with an emotional, lasting message about courage, truth, and family. The bus stop becomes a lasting symbol, tying the story together for generations.